All right, we're joined, continue our media availabilities here at Dover International Speedway. We're joined by Dale Earnhardt Jr., driver of the number 88 Nationwide Chevrolet for Hendrick Motorsports, and also Mike Tatoyan, president and CEO of Dover International Speedway, who has a special presentation for Dale. I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Thanks, Kurt. Everybody can hear me okay back there? Can't see. I'm handsome, but you'll be able to see me shortly. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure, again, to play host to a great weekend here in Dover, especially given the fact that all three series has playoff and championship implications. Hopefully your trip here was uneventful and you're settling in for a terrific few days. And certainly to all the members of the media, we certainly thank you for covering our sport. You know, this racing weekend presents an interesting contrast. Later this afternoon, we're going to see some young guns, some 16 and 17-year-olds really battling for a championship in the NASCAR K&N Pro Series East as they make their way up the NASCAR ranks. And then on the other end of that spectrum, we're here this afternoon to present a memento to a future Hall of Famer. During our 48-year history, we have run 95 Cup races with 35 different Cup drivers. Obviously, a lot of those have won multiple times. Richard Petty, Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson, just to name a few, have a few familiar names. But there's one race that out of those 95 is certainly the most significant in at least my unofficial mind, and I think in the minds of many. So there's one, a big gap, and then 2 through 95. On September 23rd, 2001, just 12 days after one of the most disastrous days in the history of our country, we held the MBNA Cal Ripken Jr. 400. On that day, Dale Jr. led the most laps with 193 laps and won the race. And while it may not have been the most exciting race, it was a dominating race. It certainly was one that was very memorable here at the track, not only because it was a win for Dale, which it's his only win so far here at the track, but it was one that was just bigger than any other race. It was bigger than Miles the Monster. It was bigger than the sport. It was just part of a healing process for the entire country. A few years after that, I happened to meet the White House press secretary at the time of the disaster, Ari Fleischer. And Ari shared with me that one of the most important things that President Bush wanted to do to start to normalize the country again, to really go through the national healing process, was to get our sports teams and our sporting events back on track. Our race was the largest sporting event immediately after 9/11. And if we could, Gary, if we could just play this short video for you, and then we'll make this presentation.
Those times when the country really comes together hard, you know, and really bond and get behind the same purpose. You know, nobody had an act of what was the right thing to do or how we were supposed to respond, and the whole country was really just sort of in shock. And I couldn't believe that this had happened. Everybody was kind of coming out and commenting on what they were going to do, the NFL. I didn't think we were going to wait, you know, I didn't think we were going to put off two race weekends.
Perhaps there is no more appropriate place for the return of NASCAR Winston Cup racing than the state of Delaware.
The attitude amongst NASCAR and what you were hearing outside of NASCAR was that we need to be doing what we're doing or what we're supposed to be doing. This isn't going to stop what we do and how we live and how we act. Just a lot of patriotism. You know, red, white, and blue. There was a ton of American flags everywhere. Everywhere you turned, there was a reminder or evidence of what the country had gone through, was going through, what everybody's attitude was about it, and it sort of built up over the weekend. And it was emotional, like it was heavy.
The American and checker flags out at Dover. Earnhardt Jr. wins.
Senior, heck of a job.
We didn't have anything planned we never talked about it. And everybody had something like that in the pits. You know, I don't know if everybody had a giant flag, but everybody was sort of expressing themselves patriotically in different ways, and our guys had a big giant flag. There's only these rare times when, no matter where you came from, who you were, what your job was, what your status was, you all were on the same page and you all had the same feeling and attitude. Going back to the racetrack, being at Dover, going through that process, seeing the reaction of the fans, all that was sort of the beginning of things being put back together, you know.
To commemorate that day for you, we had a specially made award that can sit on your shelf and share with your family and friends, and you can always remember that one win in Dover, but it's very rare that one person can really have the opportunity to heal an entire country, and you had that opportunity, and hopefully no one else will ever have that opportunity again just because of the circumstances in which you did that. So from our entire team here at Dover, we really appreciate what you've done for our track, what you did certainly that day, but what you've done for the sport, not only your contributions that you've made on the track, but I think equally, or maybe even more importantly, what you've done off the track. So congratulations on a terrific career, and we wish you continued best of luck, and let's go ahead and unveil this baby. Just so on here it says one race united an entire nation on September 23rd, 2001.
I bet it is.
All right, before we start with the questions here, Dale, why don't you go ahead and talk about your reaction to that?
Yeah, sure.
Special.
Yeah, I've always said, you know, I think no matter who won that race, everybody, no matter who had won that race that day, they would have done the same thing. They would have done something to express their feelings and how the country was feeling. You could sense in the grandstands, and it built up inside of everybody, and I think that I was really, I felt very lucky to be the guy that got to win that race in that circumstance, because but I know that anyone would have reacted very similarly considering what we were going through. But I appreciate this racetrack. That was a very special win for me personally, and I'll have this to remember that day for a very long time. And this has been a track where we've had some good runs, and as any track, you know it's ups and downs, but there's a respect and appreciation, and we unloaded really good today, so that was also a big plus. I think our cars got some good speed this weekend, so I'm pretty excited about how tomorrow may go for practice. But again, I want to thank Dover, the staff here. They have a unique history as a track in this sport, and they have done some very interesting and innovative things to remain relevant and give the fans a great experience. With the casino out front, the infrastructure inside the racetrack, the bus lot, everything about this place is first class. And, you know, we've always enjoyed coming here from that standpoint. And they got some great restaurants around here, and it's really flat for you cyclists. So really enjoy coming here. Can't wait to continue to come for many years. So thank you again.
Very good. With that, let's go ahead and open it up for questions. If you would, please raise your hand. I'll get a little bit of help just to find you here. Let's start with this young man right here.
Andy Markey, NASCAR Home Tracks. Dale, you've been a guy who has been a supporter after having run in late model stock car racing, and I'm curious, after the amount of interest, because you said you were previously interested in doing so, after the amount of interest last week's race at Martinsville got, is it something that's on your radar possibly next year or the years ahead, racing in the 300?
Oh man, I don't know about the 300. We've spent a lot more money than we ever took home from over there. I'll tell you that. It's a big race, very prestigious, but kind of leave it to them young guns to battle for that. If anything, I'd have interest in sneaking over to a track somewhere and just running a short weekly show, trying to get in there under the radar and have some fun, and not really. Not really a big show like the 300, but you never say never. I don't know really how I'll feel. I'm really interested just what the urges will be once I'm out of the car full time. If I'm going to really miss driving the cars more than I think, and maybe I'll want to drive the late model more often, but. Obviously, it's a team back there at the house. It ain't just me. So I got to run it by the whole group and make sure everybody feels comfortable with that. And, I definitely want to focus as well on my next job too. So, but again, I love running the late models, and I like to have those cars competing every week. Keeps you sort of plugged into the grassroots, and it's a great feeling to be able to give to those tracks and support your local tracks. And I certainly have some curiosity about going to those tracks at some point in racing, but I don't know about that big show at Martinsville. That'd be a little bit of a commitment.
Let's go to Kyle, and then right behind him to Bob.
Kyle McFadden, theracingexperts.com deal. I talked with your nephew Jeffrey a few weeks ago at Richmond, and he said he took you bow fishing down in Lake Norman, and that your brother Kerry was there also. And he said while you were doing that, your troll motor broke, and you and your brother were playfully going at it. Jeffrey said he saw a different side in you that day, the family man in you. Can you share that experience and how that
absolutely. We
encapsulates your motive to spend more time with family?
Yes, sir. I think I just never had the time. Me personally, and this isn't the way everyone is, but this is the way I am. When I was racing full time for the last 20 years, I was negative toward doing anything else outside of racing. I wouldn't make time to be with family or get out of that element, and it was racing, and very self-centered and doing whatever I wanted to do, and when I wanted to do it. Being out of the car last year for half of the season, aside, Amy's been a big influence on my life and changed me as a person in the way I think and see things, and I think has made me a more compassionate, nicer, thoughtful person. And being out of the car as well last year for so much time gave me a whole new perspective on life and what things are important and what things might not be so important. And as we get older, you have these thoughts about, man, I really, need to spend time with my brother or my nephew. As years go by, there'll be a day where this will be difficult to do or impossible to do. And so I'm certainly more, and Amy pushes me in that direction. She pushed me to go bow fishing that night. She's like, you need to go be with them boys and be with your brother. And so again, I can't give Amy enough credit for how she's, showed me a whole new perspective on life, and it definitely showed me how to enjoy it. But yeah, for the longest time when I was racing, I didn't want to do nothing. Everything sounded like it was in the way. If it wasn't driving cars or it just wasn't on. It wasn't an option. It wasn't on the table. I didn't want to do it or be around it. Or I just have time. Even though I had the time, I didn't have the time. That was the excuse. But now I'm excited about getting out of the car and having time to do those type of things and spend more time around my family and friends and, kind of racing can, if you let it, racing can make you really narrow-minded, frustrated, hard to be around, difficult person to deal with. And it did that to me for a very long time. I let it happen, and certainly have learned from that over the years. And so I'm excited to start a family. I hope that I'm fortunate enough to do that with Amy, and we definitely want to do that. And it'll be weird not being a race car driver, or if I have a daughter or a son, I think about that too. What are they will they even understand what I'm trying to tell them when I'm, try to explain what I did for a living for a long time? But maybe that doesn't matter. I don't know. A lot of things I'm probably thinking about don't matter when you have a child, but I'm hoping to find out all that stuff here soon.
Very good. Let's go to Bob and then up here to Tim.
Bob Pockris, ESPN. You were the first driver to speak out on Twitter on the right for peaceful protest. I'm curious, what was the reaction from other drivers and team members in the industry about whether they should have that right? And have you had any discussions at Hendrick on any protocol when the anthem is played?
No, I haven't. I haven't had any discussion with any other drivers or crew members or any. There's always open dialogue with Hendrick Motorsports is my employer and my boss man Rick, but we haven't really had much conversation about it, to be honest with you.
Go to Tim.
Furlong from NBC out of Philadelphia. Dale, play on that. What is your stance, if you could reiterate in person and not over Twitter? What is your take on the guys? It almost seems like some of it's gotten a little bit lost into what people are kneeling for and locking arms. It's very confusing at this point. What's your take on the whole thing?
Well, I've always stood for the anthem, and I always will, but I'm not quick to rush to judgment of somebody who wants to do something different. And I think I've, we have a podcast that we put out every Tuesday. We had a pretty good discussion on that, which pretty much summed up my position. And I feel pretty confident that anyone who listens to that will know exactly how I feel.
Let's go to Holly and then Mark.
My question is very different from that. Holly Kane, NASCAR.com. Dale, speaking about possibly entering one of these races or something after you've retired, what name would you use to enter the race?
What name? William Bonney. That was Billy the Kid's name, and that's what I used at hotels. So maybe, yeah.
Used to.
Well, I don't sleep in too many hotels anymore. But William Bonney was always sort of the moniker that we would use in those kind of situations. But I doubt I would even try it. I think I'd just come on in there and race, and I wouldn't really have any reason to hide, I suppose. I might enjoy signing some autographs or just kind of being in that environment as a driver. That's going to probably be very hard to quit cold turkey. So it might do me some good to kind of have those feelings again and just be down in the pits and roaming around. And I've been there as a car owner, and I was lucky enough to be there at one particular race where we won. So we got to take some pictures in Victory Lane, which was a lot of fun. But I'm sure I'll miss that as a driver. That's definitely going to happen. And I know I don't want to make this sound like that I have plans to do this, because again, I have a wife at home that's part of this discussion before it happens. So I have to make sure that it's good for both of us, and it's something that will be fun to do, and then maybe I go do that.
Let's go to Mark Schwartz and then up here to Dan Gelston.
Hey, Junior. Mark Schwartz, ESPN. Last weekend we saw what happened with NFL players protesting and owners locking hands. We heard the president say that NASCAR fans would never tolerate this disrespect to the flag. And then moments later, you came out with your tweet. In the light of all of that and what Richard Petty and Richard Childress said, how, if at all, would NASCAR drivers be treated differently than other professional athletes if they took a knee or did some kind of peaceful protest? And if so, if they would be treated differently, how come?
Well, I can't. I respect. I think the whole sport respects Richard Petty and Richard Childress for what they've accomplished and what they've done, but they speak for themselves, and they don't speak for the entire sport, I believe, and I think that everybody would handle those situations differently, and I can't speak for other owners and how they would handle that situation.
Let's go up here to Dan Gelston.
Dale, how much of a challenge is it in growing the sport in getting teenagers and kids interested not in racing but just in cars in general? It doesn't seem to have the cachet as it once did.
Oh yeah, I think that there's a lot of different ways to get the fans to hit that demographic. It's there's a lot of ways in social media, being creative there. There's a lot of kids that are growing up in a social media environment, whereas my generation didn't. But so they're on these different platforms, and we need to go there with people they relate to connect to them in those areas. I'm a little biased, but like things my niece has been doing in the past with Nickelodeon and so forth, and a lot of things that they've done on social media and those little skits and so forth is a great way to, I think, reach that demographic. There's also, I was speaking about this earlier last week, the fantasy platform for us has not reached its full potential, and I think it's got great potential to get there. I think it has a great opportunity with the stage racing and so forth to become quite a booming business for NASCAR, and I think that there's a young demographic there as well, and a demographic. There's a lot of fans I think that would tune in to racing if that was, that's a catalyst for that. I know that that's worked for the NFL, and I made a comment on Twitter about that last week, and a lot of people responded with, that's why I watch the NFL. Or I was not even a casual fan until I started playing fantasy, and now I'm watching multiple games a week, and I think that that's a great area as well. That's the tip. There's a lot of pieces of the pie, but that's one piece that I think that NASCAR has a lot of great potential and growth. I probably watched maybe about 3 or 4 Redskins games a year, considering my schedule, but now I can't get enough because of the fantasy platform and what that's done for me. I watch more different teams and different games that I would have never watched before. So I think that that's a great area as well. But there's a real challenge to try to figure out how to get the younger kids. The Cars movies, anything that's going to, any kind of production like that's going to target the youth is always amazing. So anytime we have a big hit like that, that's going to be a big deal for us as a sport. So we can't do enough of those things.
Let's go to Brandon, please.
Hey, Dale. Brendan Marks, Charlotte Observer. I don't want to harp on this too much, but the tweet has been brought up, and you mentioned the podcast when you went on and kind of made your stance really clear. Is there a reason why you feel so comfortable kind of speaking your mind when maybe some other drivers might not be?
I've just always been pretty transparent, and I don't always claim to be right, but I think in transparency and conversation and compassion, you can learn. You can learn from others. So there's only one way to sort of do that, and that's by communication and sharing. And so I've always sort of been eager, in a sense, to know more and to learn more and to try to understand both sides. And so I think that's where that comes from.
All right, with that, Dale, we want to wish you the best of luck at Dover, and thank you for coming in today.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
It's really, really pretty. Couldn't get close enough. There you go. Thank you so much.
Yeah.